Hello everyone, are you interested in what kind of things Japanese people are surprised when they visit other countries? My name is Tetsuya. In my channel, I am going to introduce a lot of interesting fun facts about Japan. So today, I would like to share my own story of my experience of visiting Singapore for the first time. What was surprising to me when I visited Singapore for the first time? Today's experience is the experience I had when I visited Singapore for the first time. That's why there are a lot of ignorant things I am going to talk about. Please don't be insulted if you are Singaporean people. Okay, so let me get started. So the first thing I was surprised in Singapore when I visited Singapore for the first time was Singapore was not that clean. Maybe what I am saying right now is not very accurately telling the fact Singapore is clean, but for my personal impression about Singapore, when I saw Singapore for the first time, when I entered the town, the cities of Singapore for the first time, I was not that surprised at the cleanliness of Singapore. Do you know why? I actually wondered why there are so many people in the world who say Singapore is beautiful. Singapore is a very clean country, but I wondered why. Then I thought about the reason why many people in the world say Singapore is beautiful. Well, I thought over that, and I just noticed that, well, because I am from Japan, I am used to seeing this kind of cleanliness. So, of course, Singapore is clean, relatively clean, but in my Japanese perspective, because I am already used to very clean places in Japan, that's why I thought I was not that surprised to see clean Singapore. Of course, I was just born in Japan, and I just lived in there just because I was born there. So I'm not boasting Japan, but I just want to talk about the possible factors why I was not surprised by the cleanliness of Singapore cities. Well, so the second thing I was surprised at in Singapore when I visited Singapore for the first time was there are so many regulations which cause a fine to the people. So some of the regulations I was quite surprised, and I think it's quite well-known regulations by foreigners who have visited Singapore. But for example, even if you just throw away the rubbish onto the street, you will be fined. Even if you just smoke in a public place, you will be fined. And quite astonishingly, if you spit, you will be also fined. That was quite surprising. So the number of the regulations, very strict and activated regulations in Singapore were quite surprising to me, because there are no regulations like that in Japan. You can throw away the rubbish on the street. Of course, it is not good, but you will be most probably not fined at least. Of course, people automatically don't do that. So the third thing I was surprised at in Singapore was, it's again about the regulation, but actually the missing regulation in Singapore. So talking about Japan, if you have been to Japan before, in a public transportation, you are not permitted to speak on mobile phone, such as you are not allowed to speak on a mobile phone in a public transportation, such as train or buses usually. You cannot speak on phone in those public transportations. But in Singapore, there were so many people who are loudly speaking in a public transportation, such as MRT or in a bus. That was also quite surprising to me because prohibiting the mobile phone conversation in the public transportation is really unique regulation in Japan. It even didn't exist in Singapore. That was quite surprising from my Japanese viewpoint. Okay, so the fourth thing I was surprised in Singapore was, I visited Singapore in 2007, January 2007. That was the first time. Then I went shopping to the one of the supermarkets in Singapore. And at that time, I was quite surprised because when I brought my items in a basket to the cashier, the checkout point, the staff scanned all my items. Yes, up until here, there is nothing surprising. But after the staff scanned all my items in my basket, she didn't request money from me. I was quite surprised by that. And I think if you are Singaporean, you know why. In 2007, because there was not a similar system in Japan usually, that's why I was quite surprised. So I asked her, oh, where can I pay money? Then the staff politely explained, indicating the direction of the checkout point for the payment. So Actually, even in 2007, there was an automatic checkout for payment at the supermarket in Singapore. That was quite surprising. So I moved to the automatic checkout payment machine and paid money there. So that was a quite interesting and also surprising system to me, because in Japan, I have never seen such kind of advanced thing. Okay, the fifth thing I was surprised in Singapore was when I took MRT, the transportation from the airport to the city center, I used MRT for the first time. And in MRT, I was quite surprised because I heard the announcement of the MRT was announcing a few different languages. It was not only one or two, but a few different languages, as far as I remember.
Key, 陈嘉庚 Please mind the gap. 请小心空隙 Berhati-hati di ruang platform. Baik seated, tarang merah dengan berdiri dalam pada gaya.
So, and also when it comes to regulation signs, it was written by many languages actually. So I didn't wonder why there was English, of course. I didn't wonder why there was Chinese languages, of course. But I didn't understand. There are two languages I didn't understand at the time. So one of the languages was also written in English alphabet, but didn't make sense. But that was, I just found it Malay. It's a Malay language. And also there's another language which looks round, very round. So quite cute alphabet. Yeah, that was Tamil. So I didn't understand why there are so many languages like that written on the public transportation. That was also very much surprising. Who speaks this many languages in this country? Who speak it? I didn't have any background knowledge about Singaporean society. That's why I was very much surprised to have seen those so many languages written for the signs, the regulation for the public transportation. I was so surprised. So the sixth thing I was surprised in Singapore was the sanitizer attached to the toilet. So far before I have been to Singapore, I have been to, I think maybe over 20 countries. So maybe the Singapore was 21st or 22nd or 23rd countries I have been to in my life. But in any countries I have visited so far before Singapore, including Western European countries, I didn't see attached sanitizer in the toilet. But in Singapore, there was a sanitizer to clean the toilet bowl before you take a seat on it. So that was quite surprising. I only saw the sanitizer attached to the toilet in Japan before I went to Singapore, at least at that time. It was surprising in terms of hygiene perspective. I was so impressed with this sanitizer attached to the toilet in Singapore. So the seventh thing I was surprised in Singapore was Singaporean people were really, really kind. So basically Singaporean people are able to speak English, right? That's why it was quite easy to ask a way, because it was my first time visit. I didn't know how to go to this place, how to go to that place. That's why I needed to ask many Singaporean people to how to go to this place or that place. So whenever I ask the way to Singaporean people, the local Singaporean people, they always kindly let me know how to go there, how to go for that place. So that was quite surprising. And sometimes even this happened that some of the people, if my destination is near from where I was at the time, even some of the people brought me to my destination and said, bye-bye, have a nice trip. Then I saw the Singaporean people are really warm and kind. That was quite surprising. And especially one middle-aged lady I asked the way was, when I asked her for the way, she didn't know how to go there. But she didn't just stay and leave. Oh, sorry, I don't know, bye. She didn't stay like this. Then, because she also didn't know how to go to that place, the place I wanted to go to, she stopped other Singaporean people walking around us and asked that person to indicate the way I want to go to. She finished my request before she left me. That was quite surprising. And I thought Singaporean people, wow, they are very, very nice and kind people. That was my impression about Singaporean people. Okay, the eighth thing Sorry, this could sound a little bit insulting or possibly to some people, but the last thing, eighth thing I was surprised in Singapore was made by foreigners. I mean, accurately speaking, Singapore buildings, cities are made by foreigners. That was quite a surprising fact. So when I went to Singapore for the first time at a construction site, road construction, building construction, I always saw a lot of South Asian looking people working at the construction site. Then I thought, wow, there is no Singaporean people in a construction site. That was quite surprising to me. All the workers at the construction site look foreigners, not Singaporean people. That was quite surprising to me. And I thought that, oh, wow, Singapore is built by foreigners. This town was here because of those foreign workers. That was quite surprising. Because when it comes to the construction in Japan, everything is made or everything is built by Japanese people. The construction company is a Japanese company. And of course, the construction workers are also Japanese people. So everything is made or built by Japanese people completely. Of course, Japan is importing a lot of materials from other countries, but when it comes to the workforce, everything comes from Japanese people. That's why Japan is built by Japanese people completely. But when it comes to the towns, cities in Singapore, it's made by foreigners. It was quite surprising. It was a very interesting fact to me from my Japanese perspective. Actually, talking about Singapore, there are so many, maybe up to 50 or maybe even 100 surprising things to me as Japanese. So in other videos, I would like to introduce maybe some of the surprising things to me as Japanese about Singapore. But when I visited Singapore for the first time, those 8 things were especially surprising to me. Okay, thank you so much for watching my video up until here today. And see you in the next video. Bye-bye.